Prime Minister Scott Morrison has been welcomed to the White House with a 19-gun salute before holding a series of high-level meetings, including with the President in the Oval Office.
Donald Trump and Scott Morrison spoke in a joint press conference, reaffirming the US and Australia's strong strategic alliance. The pair also focused on military and trade issues with Iran and China during discussions. President Trump praised Scott Morrison as a man of great strength when asked how he'd describe him.
I would say a man of titanium. You know, titanium's much tougher than steel. He's a man of titanium. Believe me, I have to deal with this guy. He's not easy. You might think he's a nice guy, okay? He's a man of real strength and a great guy.
Well, shortly, Mr Morrison will be treated to a state dinner with President Trump, the first time a Prime Minister has enjoyed the honour since John Howard in 2006. Our North America correspondent James Glenday joins us now for more from Washington. James, what was the greeting like for Scott Morrison at the White House?
Good morning, Joe. Well, you would have seen just a little bit of that greeting there. There are thousands of people watching on as Scott Morrison and his wife Jenny were welcomed to the White House by Donald Trump and, of course, Melania Trump as well. It's always been the case. The Americans are pretty good at this sort of thing. It's jokingly called a flag-waving ceremony, but that's actually quite literally what happens. Little American and Australian flags were handed out. A lot of people were waving them. They had that 19-gun salute, the anthems, some military bands, some warm words about close friendships, mates, how we're all matey mates and, you know, have worked together and fought together and all the rest of it for a long time. A big sort of homage to the US-Australia relationship, which is in itself, I guess, you know, the entire point of a leader like Scott Morrison coming all the way over here to be feted at the White House in this way.
As you say, James, a lot of talk about mateship, about shared values and friendships. Were there any points of real difference between the two leaders?
Yeah, I think that's one of the interesting things in these meetings because although there's all this talk about how close the alliance is and everything else, you do need to watch for where there are kind of differences. And one of the big ones is, of course, on Donald Trump's tit-for-tat tariff trade war with China. Now, he thinks that's working brilliantly. He says that the United States is winning that war, whatever winning a global economic trade war can look like, and that's despite those big shadows that the trade war is casting over the world economic situation. Of course, the Australian government's not particularly keen on it because it worries it's going to be caught in the crossfire. And at one or two points, Scott Morrison was asked for his views on China. It seemed to be that Donald Trump was encouraging him to say something supportive, and Scott Morrison played a pretty straight bat and then later repeatedly stressed the importance of open markets and free trade and how that secures global prosperity. So there was one difference. The other one where the two leaders don't seem to be quite in the same space is on Iran, though Donald Trump's made so many different comments about what he may or may not do to curb Iranian aggression that it's hard to know what his final position will be. But there was one point where he did suggest the issue was going to be front and centre in talks. Here's a little of what he had to say.
Military conflict, and would you support that, Mr. Prime Minister, of military strike?
It's always possible.
Would you expect Australia to join in any military action?
We haven't discussed that. We'll be discussing that later, but we haven't discussed that yet.
James, it's not long until the two leaders meet for the state dinner. State dinners are a rare diplomatic honour. This is the first time since 2006 that we've had an Australian leader at a state dinner. What does Mr Trump want to get out of this particular dinner?
Well, I think that's the unanswered big question in all of this. Some people think that Donald Trump genuinely likes Scott Morrison and wanted to have a dinner with a kind of an ally who wasn't going to cause too much fuss. There's plenty of other more powerful countries he could have invited that may have caused him more conflict, maybe. Another theory is that given he's been an isolationist on the world stage, he now needs to build up a couple of allies that people he can go to events with and rely on and know they'll be there for him and that he'll have a good relationship with as he goes into an election year. But Donald Trump, when you look at the hard facts of his term in the White House, has been a very transactional president. There is a zero-sum calculation to a lot of things he does, and so you do have to wonder what will he want in exchange for all this pomp and ceremony. And maybe it's something to do with China and the economy. Maybe it could be something to do with Iran, or maybe it's some yet-to-be-seen favour he might ask of Australia down the track. But nevertheless, they really are, the White House, showering Mr Morrison with every possible kind of plaudit and honour that they can right at this moment.
So after the state dinner, what else is on the agenda for the Prime Minister?
Well, the Prime Minister, yes, comes here just in a couple of hours or so for this state dinner in the White House Rose Garden. And then tomorrow he's out at NASA. He's got a couple of local events around Washington, D.C. before heading to the Midwest, a key campaigning area for the president ahead of next year's election, where he's going to be visiting the paper mill of an Australian box billionaire, Anthony Pratt, who has been a friend and supporter of Donald Trump, and the president will again join him there. So those pictures are going to be quite interesting. And then after all that, Mr Morrison heads up to New York for the UN General Assembly, and there's a whole variety of things he's going to be doing up there.
All right, James Glenday in Washington, thank you.